Can you tell me a little bit about your career to date and what you've done in the teaching profession?
Yes, there's not huge amounts to tell.
Right.
I trained in Leeds and then moved to London, got the job at Holly Park as an NQT 4 years ago, and then did 3 years with Key Stage 1 and now I'm with Key Stage 2 in Year 5. So.
Good. Talk to me a little bit about your training. Do you think you had sufficient preparation for music teaching in the primary school in your training, your postgraduate year?
Not particularly. I've never taught a music lesson, so I would say definitely not.
Right.
I think most schools I trained in covered music during PPA, so it wasn't an expectation of class teachers. And
Right.
as a result, it wasn't put into the course, I suppose. So
Right, that's interesting.
quite neglected.
Okay. Now, it seems to me you're very happy and willing to have a go at it, which
Yes.
is great news. But what are your main concerns as somebody coming very new to music teaching and music education? Do you have any concerns that are particularly uppermost in your mind?
Two things really. Watching the lesson today, one was, as I mentioned before, the logistics of how you run that sort of lesson where you have equipment to get out but it's not being used all the time, and how just to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And also feedback you give the children about perhaps their next steps, because to me that isn't quite as obvious as it is to you. You know exactly how to sort of develop that and move their learning on, whereas I'm sort of less tuned into how they could do that. So I think knowing how to help them move on
Yes.
is one of my concerns.
Yeah, well, I think you've just raised the two things that nearly every, for want of a better term, non-specialist classroom primary teacher says about music. First of all, they say they've just spent 6 months getting all the disciplines sorted out, and now you're asking them to put all these instruments in there and ruin it all. And then secondly, they say, yes, really what you're addressing is progression.
Yeah.
How do you get the progression? How do you move forward? Progression, sometimes we assume that as teachers we have to lead all the time. And of course, as you heard today with your children, the children, if they're fired up, they will progress and move forward, and they will give you very clear signals about where they want to go with the learning. So it isn't always you having to pull the children along.
Yeah.
Very often, if you fired them up properly, it's the other way around, and the children will lead you along.
Let's hope so.
Have you had a chance to look at the pack?
Briefly skimmed,
You
not
had
really.
a quick look at it. Right, just to say that I think is a very important part of this whole project, because Madeline Casson, who wrote it, has been very careful to put lots of ways in, warm-up activities. She's very aware of the situation that many classroom teachers will be in. So I do urge you, to refer to the pack.
Half-term reading.
I think if you can. I mean, I think you'll find it pleasant reading. It's very interesting, very relevant, and I think you'll get a lot of ideas from it. Out of the ideas that you saw this morning, because I've just had the good fortune to teach your delightful children for a whole morning, out of those activities, and I'm not leading you, you can say exactly what you think. Was there anything about the morning that you think, oh, I could do that, or I'd like to quite try that with the kids, or I think I could do that? Did you feel empowered by any part of it?
I think seeing how gradually you built it up, so it was very slow and steady, so you did one skill and you were really explicit about the skill you were teaching them, then they practiced it, and then you brought in another one. I just think that's, particularly as I'll be learning the skills as I go along, going to be the best way to approach it, just sort of step by step by step. So I think that was the main thing I took from it, that it doesn't have to just be this perfect, amazing thing straight away, and it's a gradual process.
Very good. Well, that prompts me to say that given that you've got such a good relationship with your children, it seems to me perhaps the best way to adopt, the best attitude to adopt with them, is to be a fellow learner with them.
That's what I have actually said. I said to them just before we came back in, so to be completely honest, I have never taught a music lesson. Oh my goodness.
I think this is absolutely fine.
Basically.
I think this is absolutely fine. I think you can build up a really nice interaction with them over that, because they clearly like you very much. They clearly respect you. There's going to be no loss of respect in saying that.
Yeah.
And then you become fellow learners. And I mean, one psychologist, I think it was Jerome Bruner or somebody of that stature, that we all read in college, and I think he talked about teachers as senior learners.
Yeah.
And I love that, because you're then free to try things out, and maybe it doesn't work and try something else, and the children will work with you on that.
Yeah.
So I think that could work very well with this class.
It's good to model learning from mistakes. I think that's a good thing for them to learn.
That's what learning is.
Yeah. The sequence
What
of
else is
mistakes.
it? What else is it? I mean, how can you learn if you're not open to making mistakes?
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier on to me, when the children were finishing the workshop, that you'd already got some ideas that could link in with your curriculum work that you'd already planned, by coincidence.
I know, just by coincidence.
So what is that idea?
Well, our topic is the Earth, the Sun and the Moon, which obviously ties in with the idea of space and infinity quite well. And I thought we'd start tomorrow, because we were going to be doing art, on just, there's so many ideas about how they perceived infinity. I thought, well, let's get something down, and let's get some ideas on that. And if we have a visual, it's quite a good starting point. And the way they respond to that art that you showed them, that's obviously quite a good way in for them. So I think that's going to be the first step. And then I talked to Terry about creative writing, because there's a big drive on writing at the moment. I think, if we could have some sort of story to structure a musical piece, that might be an idea we were discussing, wasn't it? And so that's an idea as well. There's a few things, which is really, really, really nice, because it means this isn't something on top, but this just ties it all together quite nicely.
Pulls it all together.
Yeah, so that's useful, actually.
Wonderful.